We met in 1984 when I was at the Woman's Bank, and members of her family or friends did some business with us, and they informed me that they would like me, if I could, help them raise money for this hospital in Italy where they discovered how to do a lumpectomy for women with breast cancer. We didn't have it yet in this country. I don't know, did I ever I told you the story? I don't know if I ever told it. So we had auctions to raise the money. Well, I auctioned, and I got Priscilla to do my family, and I won her mother's house, which I never made it to, in Porto Ecole. But I never got there because I was moving out of my apartment. Well, this is the pictures that she did of my children. The most wonderful pictures. But now she tells me, no more people. But I love it. She is so damn talented. So when I found her here, I said, you got to come to the Institute. She's a very special person, and I'm so grateful to be able to introduce you. And so now she's more interested in the environment. And she's lived in this country since 1970. And she's the youngest daughter of Susanna Agnelli, the first female foreign minister of Italy. Now I know where you get your gumption from, huh? And she has this passion for the environment, and that's what she's going to talk about. Her work is beautiful. Priscilla.
Good morning, and thank you so much for coming today. I would like to thank Dale Couder for inviting me to speak. Last but not least, I would like to thank my ever-loyal girlfriends who came from New York and Europe and even closer locations. Before I get into more details about my worries about our planet and my passion for the environment, I would like to tell you a bit about my background. I was born in Rome, the youngest of 6 children, so it's obvious which one I am, in post-World War II Italy. I spent all my summers on the Mediterranean Sea, surrounded by olive trees, cypresses, and bougainvillea. And as you will see, bougainvillea is going to be a recurring theme in my remarks. My mother, Susanna Agnelli, was a best-selling author, politician, and philanthropist. Later in life, she became the first woman to be appointed Foreign Minister of Italy, and I would call that a major achievement. Italy now has its first female Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, nicknamed Mussolina, and another significant milestone in a country where, at least when I was growing up there, men ruled and women stayed at home. My uncle Gianni Agnelli was a very charismatic patriarch of our family. He and my mother were very close. My great-grandfather, Senator Giovanni Agnelli, founded the car company Fiat in Italy in 1899. Fiat made iconic cars like the Fiat 500, which was enormously popular and starred in many cool ads. For those of you who might be interested in the auto industry, Fiat merged with Chrysler in 2014 to become Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, and then 2 years ago went on to merge again with the French group Peugeot. When I turned 15, my mother sent me to boarding school, worried about our safety during the tumultuous early 70s in Italy, where politically motivated bombings and kidnappings by the Red Brigade were rampant. Those were known as the years of lead as in bullets. I first went to a convent just outside of Paris, which I hated. And then there was the nuns and I, which was a lethal combination. but I will leave the details of that when I write a memoir. I only stayed a year in Paris, and from there I went to an international boarding school in Wales called Atlantic College, where I met my friend Katrina, who after 50 years is still one of my closest friends and is sitting in the room right there in front of me. The setting of Atlantic College was a medieval castle previously owned by Randolph Hearst in a beautiful and protected spot on the sea known as the Glamorgan Heritage Coast. I was a jock there. Don't laugh. And I kayaked in the frigid, grey, and very unfriendly Bristol Channel, where I nearly drowned once due to very rough seas, kind of like in that picture. I also studied art and photography and spent a lot of time shooting the cliffs at low tide and the rock formations below them. I was not a great student, but I did spend hours in the darkroom and eventually won a photography prize. And this is probably what pointed me to the path forward. I was recently at Atlantic College with Katrina to unveil a plaque along the waterfront, which was inscribed at my request with Jules Verne's quote from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It begins like this. "The sea," he wrote, "is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion." After I graduated from Atlantic College, I graduated with an international baccalaureate, and I continued my journey westward towards New York, where two of my older siblings were already living and studying at Columbia and NYU. I attended Sarah Lawrence College. Meanwhile, in Italy, my mother, free of her child-raising responsibilities, wrote a best-selling memoir called "We Always Wore Sailor Suits." And it has that title because, in fact, they did wear sailor suits. And then decided to go into politics. She ran for office and became the mayor of Porto Santo Stefano and Porto Ercole, two fishing villages which are part of a peninsula off the Tuscan coast known as Monte Argentario, where she had a beautiful compound on the sea. It's just north of Rome. You can see Rome on the bottom right corner. That's her compound. One of her priorities was to protect the area from runaway development. And I think it is largely thanks to her. That's a convent up on the hill where her funeral was held and when one of my marriages was held too. It's a beautiful place in a completely protected park. So it's largely thanks to her and to the strict regional government in Tuscany that the peninsula continues to be protected to this day. Picture it as a regional equivalent of ARCOM in Palm Beach. What is less widely known about my mother is how wickedly funny she was. So I'm hoping that she's watching me from above as I try to channel simultaneously her sense of humor and her love of nature. She had an advice column in the Italian weekly Oggi. In his charming obituary of her in Time magazine, Walter Isaacson mentions one of her well-known letters. A woman wrote to ask what she should do about her husband who was having an affair with the babysitter. My mother answered, "To change a husband is complicated. Changing the babysitter is easier, but remember to get a less attractive one." In 1976, I dropped out of college in order to travel to South America and take pictures with my then boyfriend. My mother was not happy. She also wrote an opinion column for another Italian weekly magazine called L'Europeo. So pretending it was an opinion piece and not actually advice, she ordered me back to college by writing a piece bluntly titled, "Priscilla, I beg you, go back to school." I did not appreciate it at the time, the public airing of a private matter, but it actually worked. I went back to school, graduated, and became a fashion and portrait photographer in New York in the late 70s, working for various magazines. When 8 years later I became a mother, I felt a strong need to control my own schedule, but resisted giving up working completely. The last anecdote I will tell you about my mother is related to becoming a mother, when I became a mother for the third time. When my daughter Sasha was born in 1995, and here my mother and Sasha are together a few years later, my mother was foreign minister of Italy and was attending the G7 meeting in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She called me in the hospital to say she was extremely sorry that she could not be there at my side that day. I told her, "Hey, I just saw you on CNN. You were the only woman surrounded by a sea of somber-looking men." I told her I was proud of her, that she looked great, and that it was okay that she wasn't there with me. At that very moment in time, she had serious responsibilities. So here's a very brief slideshow of her with Prime Minister Shimon Peres of Israel and Hillary Clinton, who was First Lady at the time, and then Pope John Paul II. At the end of her life, she retreated to her garden on the Mediterranean, where she spent a lot of time gardening and sitting on her favorite chair, looking out at the sea. When my mother died in 2009, she asked that her ashes be scattered in the Mediterranean in front of her house. So her love for the sea has lived on with me to this day. Fast forward. In the year 2000, I published a book called Georgica Pond. It is about a body of water and a property in East Hampton where I spent half of my life. The book is divided into seasons and has many images where my focus on nature becomes more and more obvious. It actually perfectly blended my love of nature, which definitely included my dogs, with my love of nature. In 2012, my friend's dog died while drinking water from the edges of Georgica Pond. Toxic blue-green algae blooms had started to develop, and so with a group of concerned neighbors, we got to work. We started the Friends of Georgica Pond Foundation, and thanks to an incredible team from Stony Brook University, we organized a buoy to monitor blue-green algae levels in the pond. We also found an incredible machine called an aquatic weed harvester that navigated in and out of all the coves and picked up excess nutrients all in the pond. Picked up excess floating vegetation, and that would reduce the amount of nutrients in the pond. The blue-green algae blooms were caused by excess nitrogen and phosphorus coming from antiquated septic systems. So we spearheaded a campaign to make sure people replace their old septic systems with new state-of-the-art ones. And slowly but surely, change is starting to happen. Fast forward. In 2013, I took a trip to Utah and fell in love with these incredibly man-made rock formations called hoodoos. As I write in the introduction to the catalog which accompanies the show, I first visited Southwest Utah 10 years ago with my 3 children. Nothing prepared us for the vast landscape that unfolded on our 4-hour drive from the Las Vegas airport. As we climbed towards the Colorado Plateau, we passed miles and miles of majestic, juniper-dotted ridges to our north. As we approached Lake Powell, the scenery became increasingly more dramatic and barren. Huge mustard and coal-colored cliffs towered over us in an almost menacing way, and smaller plateaus stretched hundreds of miles to the east towards Monument Valley. After then, President Donald Trump decided to cut Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in half. This is how it looked before, and that's how it looked afterwards. The project took a slightly political slant. I was devastated as the areas where our brilliant guide had taken us and where most of the following photographs were taken had suddenly become ex-monument lands. President Biden has since restored the monument to its original size, thanks to the recommendation of his Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, the first Native American woman to be appointed to the post. The project resulted in an exhibition in New York and a big article in the New York Times, which honestly changed my life. The article had come out online on a Saturday, but I didn't know if it was going to come out in print, in which section and how big it would be. It turned out they announced the article on the front page a few days later on Election Day and gave me a page and a half inside, including the cover of the art section above the fold. So thank you, Susan, for that amazing wake-up call that morning on Election Day. In that article, I describe the most exciting day of my Utah adventure, which has to do with this location. That is me in that circle, photographing one of the hoodoos, and I'm going to tell you the story of that day. Well, we left at 3 o'clock in the morning. In pitch dark, I had a headlamp. We crisscrossed this river with freezing cold water, and I had sneakers on. He didn't tell me. We after 3 hours got there, and I was soaking wet. We took pictures. In this place, we took pictures, and it was incredible. Okay, after a while, I said to the guide, you know, there's that the sky is getting awfully black there in the back. I'm thinking that maybe we should seek refuge somewhere. And he said, no, we're just gonna, keep going. And I said, that looks like a pretty bad thunderstorms. And he said, no, it's fine. And I said, no, let's walk back. And I said, in fact, maybe we should find a cave. Well, we didn't find a cave. We walked back to the car for 3 hours in a thunderstorm with lightning falling, from me to the table. And then I finally went, I don't care if it's meant to be that I'm going to die today hit by lightning, I'm going to die today hit by lightning. And I just was completely fatalistic, and I thought to myself, I could think of worse places to die, frankly. So there it is. So now we leave Utah, and I'm going to talk to you about my next project. So speaking of trees, my next book project is called 3 Lindens. It is going to be a book, an exhibition at the Peter Marino Art Foundation in Southampton, New York, opening in late July. This is going to be my way of honoring a group of trees on a property where I spent half my life. I photographed these lindens over the span of 30 years through a series of storms. I wrote in the introduction of the book, which is going to press as we speak, the house in East Hampton where our family lived for 3 decades was called Briar Patch. It had many old and majestic trees. Chief among them were 3 lindens, which stood on their own at the edge of Georgica Pond. The trees were right in the middle of a 180-degree view over the water and the Atlantic Ocean beyond. They seemed to protect the house from the elements. When I started photographing the lindens, most recently, I spent a long time under their canopies, pointing my camera upwards and recording. I noticed, perhaps for the first time, how their branches were intertwined, embracing each other like a family, the larger tree dominating the 2 slightly smaller ones to the left. And I kept wondering how they came to that spot. Legend has it that the lindens could have found their way to the property from a French ship, the Louis Philippe, bound to New York from Bordeaux, France, in April 1842. When, in rough seas, the boat started sinking off the coast of East Hampton, the many trees and shrubs it carried, including lindens, were thrown overboard, to lighten up the load. They washed up on the beach and were then planted by local farmers. So these are the images that I took of the lindens over a 30-year span. This is during Hurricane Bob in 1991, before and after. This is a picture of me during the hurricane taken by Leonora Kennedy, sitting right there. I have water. Yeah. And these were taken more recently. This was taken during the blizzard of 1996. And this was taken in 2020, 2014. This is my daughter running under the trees with a friend, and this picture actually shows you the scale of these trees. An arborist recently visited the property and told me the lindens were the American species, not the European species. So it means they could not have come from the French shipwreck. I was disappointed, as I was fully invested in my year of magical thinking. But he also gave me some wonderful news. The arborist told me that the trees were between 200 and 250 years old after measuring their height at 70 feet and their circumference at 24 feet. He also shared with me that the biggest of the three lindens had just been declared a state champion by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Sorry. It means it's the largest linden tree in the state of New York. I did not know until very recently what a champion tree was, so I became curious about them. Does anybody know which state has the highest number of champion trees in America? Okay, well, it turns out that it's Florida. There are 122 champion trees in Florida versus only 22 in New York State. So I guess the 12-month growing season must have something to do with it. Which brings me to why I live in Palm Beach. When I bought my house 17 years ago, my friends, especially the liberal ones, laughed at me. They said, "You don't seem like a Palm Beach kind of person." And I always answer, "Come and visit and you will understand why I'm here." I have a light-filled Bermuda cottage, which I named Little Italy. It is about a mile south from the Sailfish Club. I bought it to escape the cold and the darkness of New York winters. My cozy garden has a very old bougainvillea above the front entrance, as you can see, that I particularly love because it reminds me of the Mediterranean. From my house, I can walk to the ocean via a beach access at the end of Eden Road. I can also bike or walk on my beloved lake trail. When I bike, I often stop to take pictures of particularly beautiful bougainvillea hedges I am thinking of emulating once I decide to remove my much maligned ficus hedge. How many of you know there is a palm tree growing inside a Florida strangler fig in front of the landmarked house called Duck's Nest? I was kindly granted access last week so I could also photograph the base of the trees. It is an incredible phenomenon, and because the trees are lit so well, it is particularly noticeable at night. And I'm sure many of you have seen this giant kapok tree in front of the Royal Poinciana Chapel, or these banyans in front of the new marina off Australian Avenue, or this tree at the corner of Palmo and North Lake Way, or the extraordinary banyan in front of the Norton Museum. Now I switch from love of trees to love of the sea. I walk to the beach religiously almost every afternoon to look at the ocean and to think. As I think there, I observe boats go by, pelicans flying overhead, a shark who wanders a bit too close to the shore, and lately I have become fixated on the cloud formations, which are remarkably beautiful, especially when a cold front is approaching or a thunderstorm is within view. As a weather and adrenaline junkie, I'm also going to show you a brief slideshow of Palm Beach weather events and how I was affected by them during the last 10 years. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy turned our beloved lake trail into this. I was in Palm Beach that weekend doing political canvassing for President Obama, and when I saw this storm surge from a hurricane which was several hundred miles offshore and not even headed for Florida, I ran to the airport with my friend Mary here today, and we got on the first flight back to New York to be with our families. I had a feeling Sandy was going to be a problem, and it was, just not in Florida. In 2017, Hurricane Irma managed to take down my 2 big mango trees, and it truly broke my heart. It also tried to destroy my bougainvillea, but it was artfully reattached by my gardening team. Hurricane Nicole almost hit Palm Beach a few months ago. These pictures do not do justice to the strength of the waves crashing along the retaining walls of the oceanfront homes near where I live. I watched the beautiful vegetation covered dune where my dog, that was my dog Leo, he loved to sit on that dune, and it got completely wiped out by the hurricane. So I kept going back to the empty lot at the end of Eden Road to take more pictures of the waves and possibly risking my life in the process. They say Palm Beach will be underwater in approximately 80 years. I will be long gone, but I do worry about our planet, for my children and my grandchildren. How could I not? I see progress with climate change-related solutions, but I would like to see us move faster. I think we should plant more trees to get more shade and remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as the planet keeps warming. I saw what the last 2 hurricanes did to direct seafront properties, both in Fort Myers and Daytona Beach, so retreating from the coasts may at some point become inevitable. I also observed last summer the enormous quantity of sargassum seaweed piling onto our beaches. It has become a serious issue for the last 10 years, both in South Florida and in the Caribbean, and it will continue to be. The University of South Florida College of Marine Science is studying the phenomenon, but there are no clear answers yet. Still, as I stand here to raise awareness, I would like to end this on a light note. I consider myself extraordinarily lucky to be able to live here. In addition to the trees, the ocean, and the cloud formations, one of the things that makes me the happiest here is my resilient bougainvillea. Notice how it's starting to look like my hair. And the next thing, that as I was walking around the neighborhood yesterday, the next thing I might aspire to is a chimney bougainvillea, like my next door neighbor on Via Marilla and North Lake Way. And then perhaps the next thing I'll do is have a mailbox bougainvillea like my next door neighbor on Garden Road. Anyway, long live nature, and thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry about my raspy voice. I really do apologize for my raspy voice, but I had no voice 3 days ago. So.
Is there any questions? Okay.
What is causing the sargassum seaweed? Why is that now a problem? I see it every day on the beach.
Well, it's going to get worse this summer. There are theories that it's coming from the Amazon, and then there are other theories that it's coming off of Africa. And every time I read about this, the explanations are not clear. They say fertilizers of the Amazon that get caught up in the Gulf Stream, and then they say instead fertilizers coming off of the rivers, off of the western coast of Africa. But it's always inconclusive, and I do read up about this quite a bit. So they don't have the answers yet, but the University of Florida is on the case. Yeah. Never. The linden trees were never pruned. That's why they look like that. Shaggy and resilient. Yes.
I was just wondering
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering if you or anyone else has read the Pulitzer Prize winning book Overstory.
It's on my night table.
It's amazing because it talks all about how the roots of the tree systems are like the neural pathways in someone's brain, and how they're totally, as you spoke of, it's all totally integrated. They help each other. They care for each other.
I mean, in the introduction,
Got to read this book.
In the introduction of the book that is now gone to press, I write an essay about the lindens that goes much, 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 much deeper, and I do talk about all that.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to get into it because
Yeah.
I didn't want
Right.
to start crying.
Yeah,
so,
right. But everyone should read this book. It's
yes,
an amazing
it is
book.
on my night table.
Yeah. Okay, that was beautiful. Thank you.
Well, my next project is the project about the lindens. Yeah, and that's coming out this summer. And then after that, I'm going to write a memoir. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.